I would be willing to entertain the idea that it's because the CWCB is meeting here. We don't get a lot of rain like we've been getting the last several days. So, in fact, we exist on about 10 inches of precipitation a year here in this valley. So, you guys have probably seen 15 to 20% of our annual precipitation over the last couple of days. So, appreciate that. I want to welcome Jayla Poppleton and John from Water Education Colorado. They're here with us this morning just to be on site and be seen. And they have their own board meeting tomorrow. Yeah, so I know there's some people from our group that overlap with them, but welcome to our meeting and glad you guys can make it. So we'll get going here. We're going to launch right into item 10, Basin Director Reports. And our first Basin report is the Rio Grande with Director Combs.
So just a little, try to get this going. Be all right. Okay, so as you know, we had the board had a training earlier this month and in Keystone, and is really well attended and done. Appreciated all the information we got and the ability to kind of figure out how we can work better as a board. One of the things that I took away from it, probably the strongest, was Director Brody hating my director's reports. So. And maybe she didn't say it quite like that, but I just felt the pain. That's all I remember is the pain. In all reality, so talk about the best job in the world. This is one of the sunrises there. In the Rio Grande, our fall updates, we've almost had 2 separate years in the same season. In the beginning, we were flooding and washing out everywhere, and then it just turned off and we're drying. So we're getting stream flow forecasts that are dropping. The good thing is it lowers the amount of curtailment. So we're actually still providing water to our irrigators in spite of a heavy forecasted and a heavy flow year. So the timing has been interesting, but for finishing the year, we're not doing too bad. The Canais Water Conservancy District has been working on a small reservoir and finally are able to start finalizing all the land acquisitions. So we're seeing that moving forward. So it shouldn't be too long before we start having some construction going and get some new storage in the basin there in the southern end. We're excited about that. The basin, I'll play this while you can watch that. What a terrible job I have, huh? Look at that. So the Basin Roundtable is working to improve our ability for our outreach and our messaging. And so we're working pretty closely with American Rivers, with St. John and Fay, and helping us refine our messages to where they're, I guess, easier to receive. Sometimes what we think we're saying is not what people are hearing. And they've been a big help. And I appreciate what the roundtable is doing to make sure they're not just meeting and take care of their own business, but trying to get the word out. And so doing a lot of good work there in the roundtable. The sub-districts are doing really well. Most of them are meeting all their ARPs and are on track. Something that I didn't put in is, so the lawsuit with New Mexico, Texas, and Colorado, the 3 states had agreed and entered into kind of the agreement. The federal government, of course, opposed. The time was about to expire before they could file an appeal. They asked for an extension, which makes us think they are going to appeal our decision. So that's still kind of hanging out there for us on the compact. But like I said earlier, at least all 3 states are now kind of facing the same direction on that one. We had a peer review team for the RGDSS, which is the model for the district. And it's been a while since we've had one, but that went off really well. We're getting back into the swing of catching up on some of those stipulated agreements that we all entered into for the ground rules. And so things are progressing well there. Groundwater, the aquifer sustainability, it continues to be a focus for us. Specifically, Subdistrict 1 still has some challenges. They had really good, just like everyone else, had good snow melt, had a good fill up. Hopefully, because of the dry second half of the season, they don't end up pumping all their credits away, but they're still working hard at that. One more video. There you go. Look at that. I don't mind working the night shift. I'm not going to lie to you. It's pretty good. And Director Ryan, that's surface water. Just to be clear, surface water. So the last thing I was going to tell you is like we've been noticing farm fuel prices in the valley have risen about 35 cents a gallon. So harvest is a little different, but I was going to show you at Combs Farms what we're looking at for some innovation and some alternative and green new power sources. Let's see if there we go right there. We're looking into the water buffaloes. That I had to sneak that one in. That's my son on the front. He's in the Philippines and come across a farmer that was out plowing and he let him ride there. I mean, only a farm kid's going to want to get on the animal, right? Not just look at it. So anyway, other than that, everything in the Rio Grande, we're doing pretty good. We're hanging in there and getting things done. So that's all I've got, Director Phelps.
All right. Thank you, Director Combs. Any questions for him? Yes, Director Brody.
So just to clarify, I do enjoy your director's reports, but to be clear, we all aspire to achieve the level of Director Sakata when it comes to our director's report. So keep trying.
I will just keep working. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there's different bars, right?
Well, I'm going to set the bar really low. I have to be honest, my life and my duties on the newly formed task force and everything else, I don't even really know what's going on in my basin right now. We've gotten really nice moisture over the monsoon season. We did end up being fortunate with that, which has been 2 years in a row. After a hot midsummer, that was pretty awesome. And the highlight that I have that I was able to re-engage in the water world locally was I was sick, but I called in for the Basin Roundtable meeting. I think it could have been last week. It might have been 2 weeks ago. I have no idea. We had a roundtable meeting and Becky and Amy and Emily, and there may have been somebody else there, but I couldn't see on the Zoom. I came and gave a really awesome presentation and it was very interactive with our roundtable. And typically our roundtable meetings go until 9 p.m. I signed off at 9:30 and it was still going. I thought that it was just really great for people to be able to ask questions. They gave a really awesome presentation that was, I thought full of information that maybe this board knows because we have been privy to watching our talking points change over the last few years and the good work that Becky has shared with us every other month. But those folks got to do that in person with her and hear kind of the progression from where we were, when this so-called crisis really got attention, and to where we are now. And I just want to throw kudos out to that team. And yeah, I will cede the rest of my time. And thank you for not judging me too harshly for my short director's report.
Well, thank you, Director Brown. And I guess for a number of us, maybe have had the opportunity to visit your basin twice this year between the board meeting and the Water Congress in August. And so we have a little sense of our own, what's been going on up there. And just appreciate your hospitality in August. That was just good to be up there and had a nice time of year when you can sit outside and everything. And we certainly, I think, all appreciate how hard you've been running. Yes, Director Sakata.
Yeah, I would also like, Director Brown, thank you so much for your involvement in that Colorado Drought Task Force. You and Kelly both really appreciate. I know you're representing quote unquote industry, but your knowledge of what has been going on through CWCB and all of our processes on Colorado River, I think it's really beneficial to have you there. And I know it's a tremendous lift. So thank you so much for your dedication in that area. And Kevin Ryan, thank you very much too. Exactly. Thanks.
Kelly.
Yep.
And Kate.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to say, the task force it's been really cool to engage in a smaller setting with people, that I'm sure Kevin and Kelly know just as well as I have, in your career in water and plus the two tribal representatives. That has been, Lisa and Letitia, that's been amazing to have them at the table just in this group. I think we're all learning from each other, and maybe some of the things that we had, we're doing the intra-state tools, and it's been really fun to hear what people are working on, what they're thinking about. And we have, some people probably read the article, like 72 tools in the spreadsheet. And we, I think talked about maybe 6 at the last meeting. So I fully expect a robust, maybe other 6 the next meeting. We could probably do this for the rest of our lives, it seems, but it's been a great process. And for those of you who haven't been following, I just want to say that it really has been unique and great to engage like that with colleagues.
If I may follow up, Mr. Chair, thanks. And also, just like you do with us here, thanks for your push for transparency and public input. I think it was great that you opened it up, for every meeting to provide people to provide comments. I think that was really beneficial. So thanks for your efforts in that as well.
Thank you. And I forgot I had one more. I just really wanted to give Viola a shout out. That was all I had on my director's report, and I didn't even do it. So thank you so much for all the logistics and for navigating. That's what reminded me of it. The Zoom option for public comment. I hope that it gets utilized more often so we can hear from the public. But also, I was one of the ones that really loved how you did the board packet this year, this meeting. And I just want to thank you for constantly helping us improve and try new things, even if it doesn't end up to be permanent. It's been just a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Brown. Now we'll go to the Colorado River main stem with Director Boucher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to all of you. I'm very sad that I missed hanging out with everybody last night. I also, on that note, want to thank Viola. It seems like I always throw her a video or something complex to do at the last minute prior to these events. So thank you, Viola. And also a big thank you. I think that the new style of board packet, as Director Brown just pointed out, it's like a trick. It's like a mind game. It doesn't feel nearly as overwhelming because it's not all put together. It's just a piece at a time. I actually, just mentally, I appreciate it. But I did attempt to count how many actual pages were in it still, just so you know, so you're not really fooling me. And then with that, I also want to give a sincere thanks to staff and board and other people there for the process yesterday of the election of Director Sakata. Thank you so much for the kind words and the friendship and understanding, my life right now. And I'm very excited to remain on board and very engaged. So thank you so much for the kind words and the process. And then with that, we've got in the basin, it's been a wild summer, as many know, some places dry, some places too wet to really successfully harvest. It's an interesting thing to learn about as we kind of wind down a lot of harvest season at the higher elevations. A lot of producers are actually a little bit short this year, which is very surprising given the amount of abundant precipitation. But I think that we are attributing it to a cooler and colder, basically spring coming into the summer season, that it took a long time for vegetation forages to kind of get growing. Not horribly short, and certainly not complaining. It's been nice to be pretty soggy. My family is soggy out of the hayfield again. We are still in harvest mode and attempt to be wrapped up by September 10th. So we're quite a bit behind this year, but I take that as a blessing. And with that, the group of partners that put together the Basin Roundtable's Conserve Consumptive Use project dating back to 2020, it's been a little bit of a roadshow here for the last bunch of weeks because some substantial reports are coming out with significant information, not only for the overall project, but really 3 years of data associated with this from both the first year of limiting water supply and then recovery in years 1 and 2. And we're actually in the process of putting data together for this year. So there's a ton of information about it. And I only bring it up in my director's report. I think it might be appropriate to talk about it today during agenda item 15 with SCPP, but it's been fascinating to even talk about the results in group formats because it's kind of changed my perspective on it a little bit when you're discussing that. It's like, well, 2020 was one of the warmest, driest years, when we did the actual test experiments. And then 2021 was one of the lowest flowing tributary water years that we've ever seen. And then you'd think that 2023 would be this banner year with the abundant precipitation, but we had a cool spring. And so navigating conversations about what we're trying to learn about water and saving water with variables of hydrology and weather, it's a very complex conversation and something that's pretty exciting to talk about. So if some of you haven't had a chance to see the roadshow, Dr. Cabot presentation on conserving water, it's pretty fascinating, and I'd be happy to arrange it as appropriate. With that, for our roundtable, we've got some changes coming. There'll be a discussion. Our next meeting is this coming Monday. There's going to be some discussion of election of officers. I think that Chairman Turner has agreed to remain on board until January. And then I think that he is looking to step down from being the chairperson. And so we are discussing that. We also, within the Colorado Basin, have had a pretty loose grants committee. I don't even think it's formally a committee, people that help out Jason essentially. And so we're looking to really firm that up and take a little bit of the pressure off of the chair. I think that somehow when Jim Pokrant was chair, he loved doing a whole bunch of stuff, but I think that within our basin, we need to do a better job of dividing some responsibilities given some of the situations going on. The West Slope roundtables are looking at some kind of roundtable summit, West Slope roundtable summit for the first part of November. They have not pinned down a date for this yet, but I think there's been some communication about that with some of the staff, more information on it to come, because I don't really know too much more other than they really want the roundtables to have some of the fresher study information associated with the risk studies. And I'm sure a lot of that will spill then into the C9 summit coming in November as well. And then I also need to thank Commissioner Greenberg for the invitation to attend I have to read this one because I can never remember what WASDA stands for, the Western Association of State Departments of Agriculture's annual meeting. It was clear back at the end of July, not very long after our board meeting, but it's really neat to engage and see Commissioner Greenberg interact with her counterparts, and really what for that conference, a large focus of it being on water and how she always is looking out for, all of us and specifically the water community. So thanks, Commissioner Greenberg, for that invitation, and it was a real pleasure to join. And also thanks to Anna Moss, who was our moderator. It felt very much at home there with Anna. She did a great job. And then I think I'll probably, if possible, cue up the video now before I go to my next stretch, because I want to keep the ball rolling with something. You hit the video whenever you're ready, if possible.
Every time I'm out here, I am more and more impressed. You can see some of this stuff still emerging and coming up, but if you do Art's hat trick, I am very excited at what is going on. I think you're winning, and I do not think you're going to have to come mow weeds again. Adios.
So that is a field of planted sandfoin with a cover crop of oats, and a lot of the forage you saw out there were oats. With the rainy season that we had in some of these alternative crop plantings, it has been interesting because it did encourage, quite a few weeds in that particular field. It was mowed and harvested. But the sandfoin that's coming up in that particular field, it was planted in June, and it was the replacement of an alfalfa field in Grand County. And this is really going to be one of the tests of essentially, can we really grow the same amount, the same volume of sandfoin as the volume of alfalfa and save 25% water? That's the goal of the project. And so more to come on that as things continue to develop. But for what it looks like and what the goals are with the successful planting of sandfoin, we're winning. It's looking very good. And on that note, to kind of beat the drum, I think there's been some conversations around about, farm scale research stations, research facilities. The more that I talk about it and engage in conversation, the bigger fan I am of them. And there's many people in the room to thank for that, especially for Michelle Garrison's interest in some of this conversation, because I think that some of the things that are occurring with different alternative forages projects, a lot of the work that Greg Peterson and Kawa has been doing with the Ag Innovations Grant, I think we're going to be getting to a point here where a lot of this is determined to be successful, but it also, comes with a recognition that for many ag producers, while we can prove, in smaller plots that this can be successful, to become more resilient, to potentially save significant water, we kind of have to get it to that farm scale level where, people will care about sandfoin when I can feed it to cattle for a winter. People will care, and especially in areas where we're talking about it as a forage feed instead of somewhere with facilities set up as a grain crop. I think it really does matter, and there's some momentum with it right now. More to come within it, but I think I'm a big fan of putting this to a larger scale test in multiple locations. Because I think that that's how we're going to attract agriculture. And it's kind of what I think I've said this twice now, but Director Combs pointed out yesterday was that, we're asking a lot of ag producers to shoulder risk, associated with some of these things. And I think we can do things to where we can produce more, we can operate more effectively and efficiently in a water savings dialogue. But I don't think that should fall on the shoulders of individual producers. And there's ways that we can partner to relieve that and really demonstrate some super successful projects. So I'll look forward to continuing discussion with that. And once again, thanks to everybody. I miss you so much. And that concludes my director's report. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Boucher. Are there any questions or comments for him? Okay, thank you. Next up is San Juan, San Miguel, Dolores with Director Cloud. There she is.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. Great. So I have a few items. I know that the report was sent to you. I also have a PowerPoint for you. So we also had the state engineer, Kevin Ryan, come with the 7 staff members. They conducted stakeholder outreach meetings, and I've heard nothing but great feedback from this. And so I want to thank him for being here and providing that information. We've had a couple of potential stream management planning efforts as well too. Let me see what else. I guess I should also say we've gotten a lot of rain recently, and it kind of took out our internet a little bit yesterday, and so we're struggling with some broadband. So in case I sound a little weird, that's what it's saying. I keep getting the message that my broadband link is weak, so just in case. We also had the Colorado congressional delegation had introduced the legislation to authorize the San Juan Recovery Program. This program, as you know, is very critical to 2 of the endangered fish that we have in our area, the pike minnow and the razorback sucker. And this has been years in the making, trying to save these 2 fish. And so we're very happy with that as well. And we know that the Dolores project is winding down. Irrigation season is coming to an end for just about everyone in my area. I believe in my local area, I think water is being shut off the end of September 29th. And so we have just a couple more weeks to get our stock ponds and whatever filled for our last attempts to use that water. So we also have hunting season has started, and so we know fall is here. We know that we're going to be busy during this time, and we just want people to be very diligent, but also take care of their environment while they're out in the areas. Again, back to the Dolores project, sorry, I kind of skipped around. We had approximately 145,000 acre feet of water that was carried and was carried over in the storage, and a little over 50% of the average use was 250,000 acre feet. Again, the recent rains in the mountains have greatly helped out in our entire area. And so that's mostly my report for like what's been happening, but I'm glad that my PowerPoint is up. And so I was honored to be able to speak at World Water Week. I never even knew this conference even existed until I was asked to participate in this conference. It was held in Stockholm, Sweden. We had over 15,000 participants, which is unreal. And we basically took over Stockholm, and everybody in that country was so gracious and so helpful for all of us trying to just navigate the entire areas. Had 193 countries and regions that were represented. And this is the first time in this entire conference that Indigenous voices were recognized and were elevated to this level to be able to participate. But I also want to draw your attention to the bottom two numbers on the bottom of the slide. So 52% of the entire conference was women. And that was remarkable because there was so many women helping out and elevating other women, supporting other women. It was incredible. And we've noticed a trend for quite a number of years where women are stepping into more leadership roles within the water world and taking on this additional duty. I think we've always been there, but we're finally being recognized to be part of that solution. And then 42% were under the age of 35. And so we have a lot of emerging leaders that are coming up and hopefully they're going to be taking all of our places. And so I thought that was really good. So you can go to the next slide. So these are just pictures of my conference. Again, 139 countries were represented. I couldn't believe the amount of people that were there. It was so good. I would really want to go back to this conference again. I think I feel so empowered after I left, and I think everybody should be able to attend this conference. It was probably one of the best things I've ever done in my life. So you can go to the next slide. And so I didn't realize that Sweden had Indigenous people still remaining in their country, and so we got to spend time with the Sami people. Speaking with them, we found out that their country doesn't even recognize them. So they have basically the same issues that we have within the United States, struggling to be recognized and struggling to get the assistance that they need for their people. It was very eye-opening. And so we spent a lot of time with them, and we did a lot of land acknowledgements for them on every single panel that we did. The people that we were associated with, we had individuals from Canada, from Mexico, from Colombia, to Brazil, to Thailand, New Zealand, Australia, just about everywhere in the world. And we all participate together in different groups. And so the first photo is at the Sami organization. They hosted us the first day that we were there, and we got to spend a lot of time with them and their culture and talk about their issues that dealing with water. The next one on the next top is from my panel that I had. This was the second panel I did, and we my panel we had an individual from the Sami youth group, Camille Tooten, our commissioner. She was fantastic, by the way. She was very, very good. Daryl Vigil from Hickory Apache Nation, Sharon Magdal from the University of Arizona, Michelle Brown Yazzie from Navajo Nation. We had another individual, Ingrid from the Sami Indigenous people. We had, I can't remember her name, she's from New Zealand, and an individual, Mr. Duncan from Australia. And we all talked about the struggles that we had with water governance within our different areas. And in the bottom panel is another panel that cause they broke us up in two different areas because there were so many of us. And so we had pretty much the whole day of Tuesday was Indigenous Day at the conference. And then the bottom left, I added this photo. This is Samuel. He is from the Maasai tribe in Arizona, or in Africa. His presentation was so powerful. It left everybody in awe. And so it was, again, this whole day was fantastic. So you can go to the next slide. And so this is the first two photos is when I had my first session was with the Australian Water Partnership. And they actually provided funding for most of the other Indigenous people from the other countries to attend the conference. And the way that I was able to attend the conference was from the Lincoln Institute and the Water and Tribes Initiative. And so this is our panel, and it was a very interactive and getting people to understand more of the Indigenous people and the issues that we were dealing with within our own areas. And this other photo on the end is, I cannot remember her name, and she is a chief from a Brazilian tribe, and she only spoke Portuguese, and so the other lady there is her translator. And you can go to the next slide. And this is kind of all of us all together. And this photo on the end, I know you could probably, why did I take this photo? So I also didn't realize that Sweden has their own royal family. And the Princess of Sweden came to the conference, and it was like the Queen of England coming to the conference. We basically kind of had to evacuate a whole area in order for her to come in. And then she sat in the front, and this is the closest I got to get to her. But she was such a powerful individual, and the amount of security that she had around her was pretty unreal. It was a fantastic experience. And but so yeah, I didn't realize that they had a royal family. So that was very interesting for us. And is that my last slide? I can't remember. Is there another slide? Yep, there we go. So we actually were also invited to the Australian Embassy. And so the first photo is of Camille Tooten. She's getting a gift from the Australian Partnership Group. And the lady behind her in the black dress, she is the acting Australian ambassador. She had just gotten into this role a few weeks before we came to her home. This was at the Australian Embassy. This part was actually in the home. And she was such a gracious person. And she's the photo standing next to her at the very end between her and Daryl V. Hill and myself is the ambassador. We all had to laugh because her story was that when the previous ambassador had left, he took all the paintings in the entire building. So the entire building was wiped clean. And so there's nothing on the walls. And that was kind of the inside joke of her speech when she talked to us. And so it was a very awesome experience to be there and to partake in this entire conference. Again, I hope that everybody if you ever get a chance to go to the World Water Week in Stockholm, please attend. It was very real, very surreal. And most of the people from the other countries, we all were dealing with the same type of problems within Indian country about lack of infrastructure, lack of sanitation, lack of plumbing in homes, lack of access to clean water. And so that was really the commonality for all of us to be there and to speak about all of those issues. And that's all that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Cloud. That's a very inspiring report. And I think we were all fascinated to hear it. Are there any questions for her? Comments, Director Sakata?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Cloud, yeah, I would echo that. Thank you so much for all you do and your participation here. That was really inspiring, and just helping us better understand is so helpful and so meaningful. So just thank you.
Thank you. Oh,
Oh, go ahead, Director.
I do have one last comment. This is actually for Paul. Gosh, I'm gonna cry a little bit, but I just want to recognize Paul for his for him at seeing the need for his family, because we as leaders, we all sacrifice, and our family sacrifice alongside of us. And sorry. So I just want to thank you, Paul, for that. So we're actually having a funeral for my aunt tomorrow, who sacrificed 36 years with my uncle as being the chairman. And so thank you, Paul.
Thank you for those words, Director Cloud. And we are thinking about you in this time for your family too. Director Vasquez? No? Okay. Okay. Anybody else? All right. Thank you for that report. Let's go to the Gunnison River Basin with Director Anderson.
I thank the chair. It's been a great summer in Uncompahgre Valley and the Gunnison Basin. It's amazing what record snowfall will do for irrigation and so forth. If you didn't raise a crop this year, you can't blame it on lack of water. Let me say that. We had a Gunnison Basin roundtable meeting this past Monday. I want to recognize Mike Berry, who is the manager of Tri-County Water. He's been the recorder for that roundtable since its inception, and he's taken the opportunity to step down. Needless to say, everybody sat on their hands in the roundtable meeting, and there were no volunteers, but I think some coercion will be able to find somebody to take that position. It's quite a task, and a lot of work goes into that. Other conversations, or the main conversation we had at the roundtable meeting, was drought. And I guess I'd preface this by saying that I see a little change in the drought map the last 3 weeks. It's pretty well stabilized. I would hope we would get some more moisture so that our snowpack just doesn't go in the ground as opposed to running off, but time will tell there. We had quite a conversation about the task force, and I guess at the end of the day, the roundtable agreed to write a letter to the task force outlining what their points that they think are very important. Aging infrastructure, most of our facilities are in their 100-some years old, and although we've continued to pick away at maintaining those and fixing them, rehabbing, if you will, there's still a bunch of work to do there. The other point was to streamline the permitting process. The national, the act and the species have gone way past what I think anybody ever envisioned. And to give you an example, it takes years to get through those hurdles, and that really does need to be streamlined. And the third thing was storage. Of course, we've working on the Ram's Horn storage in Uncompahgre Valley, but that is one solution that will help everybody as drought goes forward. One other conversation we had was agriculture water. It plays such a lot bigger role than people really give credit for it. The Montrose has got a wonderful water park. And if it wasn't for the irrigation, the water wouldn't be there to enjoy that water park. So just comment there. I got a couple of stories on a personal note. We took a Jeep ride up over Schofield Pass, which goes from Marble to Crested Butte, and what a beautiful place. And quite frankly, one of the hairier Jeep rides I've had and been on, and I've seen some tough ones in Moab and so forth, but this was pretty exciting. As we pulled up to the last pitch on the pass, there was a group of 3 vehicles there, and it is obvious they all left their vehicles in a big hurry. Well, eventually they come back, walking back down the hill, and told us the story. A bride and groom had gone up there to take their picture above the Devil's Punch Bowl. And they naturally stood out on the edge of the road. Well, the bride took a step backwards, rolled down the slope, and thank goodness went into one of the punch bowls. And I guess the groom went running down the hill now and jumped in after her. Well, that explained to us why everybody was dragging towels and so forth as they come back down the hill. But thank goodness no one was hurt. And like I say, quite a ride up over Devil's Punch Furlands and Schofield Pass. You know, this morning, I'm constantly reminded of the 6 degrees that there is between people that you meet and so forth. And I happened to mention to Greg Felt that if he knew Bernie Post, and he says, yeah, I know Bernie. Well, Bernie and I go back a ways. We were in college together, and I knew Bernie there. And Greg has promised me and assured me he'll say hello to my old friend Bernie for me. So with that, I thank you, and that's the end of my comments.
Thank you, Director Anderson. Any questions for him? Take that story under advisement for future photo ops. Okay, let's see. Next up is the North Platte with Director Vasquez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to set the score straight here. I'll never attempt to match Commissioner Sakata's reports.
Pressure's really on.
And Commissioner Cloud's report with the international travel may spur Commissioner Sakata to do a little traveling and spice up his reports. So with that, leveraging your comment, Commissioner Anderson, about 6 degrees of separation, I had an amazing conversation last night at dinner with our guest from DNR, Rob Harris. It turns out his uncle was a professor in the Department of Biochemistry where I took my PhD. And so we had this lovely conversation remembering my major professor and his uncle and all of these stories about people that we had in common. So that was delightful. Moving on to North Platte Basin, we have not had a roundtable meeting since our last meeting. So I will defer any report from the basin until after our October roundtable meeting. But I would like to take a few minutes and tell you about the Produced Water Consortium. You've heard about it in Dan Gibbs' report yesterday. I was asked to participate in that consortium, not representing CWCB, but Western Colorado Alliance. But I asked Dan if it was okay if I gave you guys a little update on what's going on there, and he said it would be perfectly fine. So we had our first meeting last Friday virtually, and we'll have our first in-person meeting October 6th. This consortium was set up by HB 1242 in the last legislative session. It was born of desire to reduce the amount of fresh water used in drilling and fracturing shale oil wells and tight sands wells. As we all know, every little bit helps. And when you look at the total amount of water used by the oil and gas industry, although we don't have particularly good records, it is nothing like agricultural use. But if we can reduce the amount of water that's used basically to extinction, this would be a good thing. So water is used either from groundwater or surface water, pumped down under pressure into the ground to hydraulically fracture the shale or open the tight sands, brought back up as flowback and produced water, and then usually disposed of by pushing down underground into a deep layer, never to be seen again in the hydrological cycle. So it is a complete consumptive use and taken out of any opportunity for beneficial use like crop, which is embodied water that feeds people or feeds animals. The original intent of the legislation was to set targets for the amount of water that was used for these industrial operations. And it's very complicated. And so what ended up happening is this consortium was formed to do research and to advise the ECMC, used to be CWCB, the Energy and Carbon Management Commission, on what options there were for regulations to help reduce the amount of fresh water. So we have a very aggressive schedule set up with meeting dates out through July 24 and probably beyond, with targets for reports and advisement to ECMC in that timeframe. And I'll be bringing a little more information as we get further down the line on the work that we're setting out to accomplish. Towards that end, in the first meeting, we elected Commissioner Messner as the chair. He brought in 2 consultants that are going to help with strategic planning, and we're supposed to be done with strategic planning in a month and a half. Wow. So might set the bar for what we're doing here at CWCB. So thank you for the time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Director Vasquez? Suggest to Commissioner Greenberg that she might want to retitle her department the Department of Embodied Water.
Yes, and this is a topic I hope we can discuss in more detail in this commission, because embodied water in our crops that we export to foreign countries, we are sending our water abroad, and whether it's priced appropriately for that use is another question. And I've had conversation with Commissioner Cicada and others at Colorado Water Congress and with Commissioner Greenberg, and she made the comment, you have to be a little careful because we have farms and ranches in other countries. So we want to be careful about how we approach this.
Good point. All right. Thank you, Director Vasquez. We'll go to the South Platte now and Director Cicada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Feeling a little pressure here now. I don't know if you guys are putting the pressure on. Well, as my tradition, I'd like to thank, this is a picture, of course, of our meeting at Crested Butte. Really want to thank everybody, including Viola, for all of that. It was a fantastic meeting. What a great celebration I felt like we had, and really recognizing outgoing Director Mitchell, and really thanking her for everything that she accomplished. And so it's really exciting to welcome Director Riss as her first official meeting. We really appreciate that, and exciting to work with you as we move forward. Just like Director Brown mentioned, their Colorado River team came to our South Platte Basin and did a wonderful presentation. Yeah, I think the South Platte Basin members are really engaged and provided Becky their unadulterated opinion. What was that right, Commissioner Mitchell? Yeah, and she welcomed it, and I think that's what everybody appreciated, that she wanted to continue to hear that. And really thanks to Amy too, that she offered to attend on a regular basis, provide the roundtable an update, and I think they all appreciated that as well. Thanks to Director Boucher and Anna Moss, they did a wonderful job at WASDA. I actually got to visit with the equivalent of Commissioner Greenberg's position from the department and from California, their Commissioner of Ag. And she really appreciated the opportunity to come to Colorado and understand what we're doing with regards to water matters. And so I think it was really, really beneficial. I think in my last report, I indicated that our house had got hit by lightning. This was amazing that a month later, there was a rainbow shining right exactly on the spot of our house where the lightning hit. So I think it always goes to show, that we hit some rough times often, but there's often a rainbow at the end of that experience. We haven't totally, we're really fortunate we have a roof over our head. We still haven't gotten everything fixed, but we're taking the advantage of improving things as we go forward as well. As was mentioned by other individuals, this weather this past year has been kind of crazy, as depicted in the clouds on the right. It's been a cooler growing season, and some of my weather stations, I think we've gotten close to 16 to 18 inches of rain where normally we may only see 10. And with those storms comes complications. With all the attention of the overuse on the Colorado River, people often ask, why do you grow crops in the desert? But really what we found that when you can apply just the amount of water that a crop needs, you can actually produce a lot better crop than you can if you're depending on these sudden storm events. I think Director Boucher mentioned that in his report that, it's so much better if you can control the amount of water that crops are growing. And so in actuality, and some of our crops did really well, and some of them we struggled with a little bit. The picture in the upper left, I included that I went into a grocery area and they had these 2 pallets of sweet corn stacked up there. That corn was from Wisconsin. It really made me mad. Again, on my soapbox of supporting local. And then too, that growers go through so much effort. You may not understand this, but we, spend a lot of time to chill the corn down so it keeps its flavor. And here they put the corn out in the middle and just let it bake essentially. And so it's losing its flavor. Bottom left-hand corner, you don't need any explanation on that. Just that the weather was creating some challenges. And even for our water management in that area, just being downstream of Denver, these big storm events, all of a sudden the river would increase tremendously and then drop off tremendously. So our ditch superintendents were really challenged with managing our ditches and not letting them overtop, because we're also getting runoff into our ditches. Where in the past that was all agricultural land could absorb a lot of this moisture. Now we're getting a lot of storm flows, and then, we're able to open up head gates for a while and not open up head gates for a while. And even another thing that you wouldn't think about that would affect the challenges of administration on these irrigation canals, believe it or not, is the new overtime rules applied to agricultural workers. In the past, what we would do, and this is an example from our farm, we would pay our irrigators 15 hours straight. And if you know what furrow irrigation is like, it's really an art that, you start the siphon tubes, and if you get it right and set it right, you can really walk away for 3 hours, 5 hours, because until the water makes it to the end of the row, there's not a lot you have to do. I mean, if a windstorm comes up and blows trash in the ditch where the siphon tubes may stop, you need to be there to make sure the ditch doesn't overflow. But we would always pay our employees straight time for that, and they were allowed to go off and do whatever they wanted to. It was almost like a contract and saying, please just get this field irrigated and we'll just pay you 15 hours a day. Well, with the new overtime rules, a lot of farmers now are finding out that they can't afford to pay that straight time. And so what they're doing now is at 10 o'clock at night, they're shutting their head gates down, which didn't used to happen in the past. They used to run it 24 hours a day. So the ditch superintendents are seeing their ditches go up and down as growers are starting to do this. So you never know what's going to complicate the operations of a canal or a ditch. This next one, be careful, the sound may get a little loud. I'm not too sure how I did this. Oh, good. Weird. So this is just a video of one of the storms blowing through. Again, the extreme weather events that we had in Brighton shows it was almost like tropical weather, hurricane weather, it seemed like. I mentioned I wasn't able to attend, thanks to the CWCB staff that helped organize the tour in Northeastern Colorado, the Climate Resiliency Tour. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend because I was attending this APS, American Phytopathological Society convention, and really wanted to stress the importance. Well, what does plant health have to do with water savings? And it has a whole bunch to do with water savings. I had committed to attend this conference, and I took the time to invite policy makers. In this photograph on the left, it's actually a staff person from Senator Hickenlooper's office. Representative Gabe Evans is there and others attended. Really wanted them to understand how important Farm Bill research dollars are. If we can promote plant health, of course, then we're not wasting irrigation water on plants that may eventually die. And so it's really just as simple as that. It was an amazing conference, over 1,000 attendees, plant pathologists essentially attended this conference. There was over 200 posters, and we had a tour of the poster session invited. We stopped at one that had to do with Phytophthora, which is affecting the peach crop in Western Colorado. Forest Health was another research scientist there. They're doing also a lot with biologicals. We saw one where they're looking at a fungus that will specifically target Canadian thistle. So it's really interesting, the work that they're doing. And then I really had the honor of going to the first day of the state fair. Commissioner Greenberg mentioned this. It was really exciting to see the U Mountain Ute Farming Enterprise recognized with a Legacy Award. It really well deserved. Chairman Hart was there, who's pictured in the middle, right next to Lieutenant Governor Primavera, and then also our Commissioner of Ag. So congratulations, well deserved on that. It was really exciting to be there and share that moment with them. It's amazing the work that they're doing there. And in closing, it is amazing that I guess maybe it's just the stage of life that we're in, that we're all losing people that we can give a lot of credit to them supporting us where we've gotten to in our lives. We heard yesterday from Commissioner Greenberg about our loss of Brent Harrison, and Director Ryan, I think you mentioned, was it Manuel Lopez that just passed away yesterday, and just his contribution. And then Director Cloud, so sorry to hear, and my sympathies go to the loss of your aunt. On our farm, we had a loss as well, and this is a picture of Raul Gonzalez, and I'm sure none of you have heard of Raul Gonzalez, but I really wanted to pay tribute to him and his family, and just the families of those individuals that have worked so hard on the farms to really provide us the food and the fiber that we all enjoy. I mean, I grew up with Raul. He's like an uncle to me. And, he worked with our family for, I think it was 45 years. Just an amazing person. And he was always so proud of the work that he did on our farm, and so proud of his family. And so just like the picture on the right was actually on the tribute, recognizing him. And I just wanted to share that today and say that until we all meet again, and really thanks for everything they all have done. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director Sakata. Director Vasquez.
I just want to thank you. You have educated me in a few months about so much about agriculture, and I look forward to continue to learning from you. You bring a totally new approach to educating by example, and it's wonderful to experience. Thank you.
And just back at you, I've learned so much too. It's just really exciting to be a part of this. So thank you so much.
Your comments for Director Sakata? The slide where you had photo of you yawning, there was the photo of the thunderstorm, and it really caught my eye. Most people don't know I was actually a fine arts major in college, and I did large format photography. So the big cameras where you put the sheet over your head and the image is on ground glass, and you can swing and tilt, and these Ansel Adams kind of cameras. Did landscape photography, and I was stuck out on the East Coast where there weren't a lot of great natural environments, or they were hard for me to get to where I was there in urban Connecticut. But I took I called it new romanticism, but it was photos like that one, where I always had power lines, street lights, stoplights in front of, these amazing skies and things. So anyway, just really appreciated that photo. I don't know, I think you were just focused on the cloud, but I loved all the stuff in the foreground as well. So thanks for that memory. As far as the Arkansas River report goes, I was thinking this morning, I think this is my 22nd meeting on this board, and probably 18 of those, I had a plan for my director report, but the process of going through the meeting the day before and maybe activities during the evening just sort of changed my whole focus and concept once again. I will say a few things about our basin, just a couple. One, I really want to echo Director Harris's comments about the Lowhead Dam removal here. It's just about, 3 miles upstream from here. It's been there a long time, and it's a killer. It's killed 3 people that I could look up their names easily. There were people before that I know of, but I don't know a whole lot about them. This river, people die on this river every year in all kinds of ways. And, that dam's just one of hundreds of hazards. And the hazards really are what make the river interesting. You can't make the thing too safe or it's no fun anymore. But in this case, it's a man-made hazard that is it's brutal. It's what we call a keeper. It's a perfect hydraulic with no exit, where all the other really nasty hydraulics on this river that flip boats and tumble people for a while, they always let you go, and this one doesn't. So anyway, it's going to be a huge relief. And we talked just briefly this morning about sort of a groundbreaking or something, but just the chance to really let the people know, like, this is finally getting dealt with. And every time we've had a tragedy here, it sort of just casts this pall over the entire community until it's, period. Sometimes it's extended for a while as we try to recover people, but just really appreciate your work on this and the collaboration. And it's one of the great elements of being an elected official, and especially a county commissioner. I think that you can take decisive action and make things happen sometimes. And this is really, it's been a great, I think, example for our new commissioner who will be carrying on as the Keith Baker and I go off in a year and in a few months here, that, you can really do stuff, step out in front of it. So thanks for sort of creating that opportunity in a way to Parks and Wildlife, and really excited to get it done. Another thing that I wanted to mention that ties back to something Director Brody was talking about yesterday in the context of the Shoshone water right discussion and looking at in-stream flows. And that was, I think, her really, I just count on her for these kinds of comments and thinking, but, horn this into an in-stream flow just because it's important and an important opportunity. I know we'll find a path forward on this issue. I'm confident of that. But, when she spoke about the hydrology and trying to make sure that we follow the processes that are in place to determine what an in-stream flow should be. And often there's a seasonal component to that and that sort of thing. It struck a chord with me because I think to get tremendous momentum and just push forward with something that, sort of overall makes sense or needs to happen, we do need to remember the statute and the policies in place And this river is a great example of why you need to do that, because while we often hear about West Slope temporary closures for the fishery, in recent years, there's been more of them than ever. In these warm summers with low snowpack, low river flows, deoxygenated water, warm water temperatures, which change the metabolism of fish, change their ability to handle stress. Just the same way that having a fever changes ours, it doesn't take a lot to make life difficult for fish. But it to me on this river, a wild brown trout population in a pretty steep and fast gradient. Current velocity is a real challenge for the trout. And so where there's sort of this default setting that people have in their minds about rivers and trout, that more water is always better, this river is an example of where actually the fishery does better at lower flows. The optimal flow is about what we have right now, actually, 350, anywhere from 250 to 400. That's when you maximize usable habitat for brown trout in the context of current velocity and sort of optimizing calorie intake versus calorie burn to sort of maintain yourself in this fast current environment. And so I just mentioned that because do a similar analysis on the Arkansas River. We don't have an in-stream flow on the main stem, but if you did, and you were looking at the fishery as opposed to recreation, the recommendation would be actually for a much lower flow than what most people would expect. And so that just kind of jumped out at me in your comments, Director Brody, that yes, you can feel like you're being objective, and yet you may not be being scientifically objective. They can be two different things. And somewhere between, I think, the biological realities and just pragmatic human reality is where the answer is going to lie, but we have to go through that process. And so I thought that was a really good conversation on Tuesday, start of one of many probably, but I really appreciated it. It made me think about this river here too. The experience of the last couple of days, I think, as often happens, it was took me off on some different paths in my mind from where I thought I was going, and that's always a sign of just a really great group dynamic. I think, you know, we're always learning and influencing one another, and so I want to thank everybody on our board and our staff. And we tend to say that a lot, the board and the staff. I felt like last night, I wish I had taken a photo. I didn't think of it. But I don't know, we had 30 people or something around that long table, and there were probably 10 different conversations going on at any given moment. And they were people connecting and across generations and stuff. And I mean, it's really amazing when you get some good people together, what comes out of that. But it was just rewarding to see the board and staff distinction vanish and just see that kind of camaraderie and people getting to know each other. And so really appreciate everyone who showed up for that. That was great. And I want to thank Viola also for all her work pulling this together, as always. I mean, it's like a whole new, I think in outfitting terms, so she's like trip leader, you know, every 2 months, making sure we have what we need and staying on course. And to Mike and Robin also, it's really great having you guys out for dinner last night too. And you know, you guys provide just an essential service here, and it's really consistent, and just appreciate that. I had hoped to introduce everybody to my wife last night or sometime this week, because I think you'd enjoy her, and she is a great caller of bullshit for her husband. And so that's, I think, I'm sorry that you missed that opportunity, but just an interesting little story about her. Probably, I don't know, 10 years ago or something. Our kids were friends with these kids that lived over in the north end of the San Luis Valley when they were young. I don't remember how they met. I think it was through soccer or something. And these kids were amazing, but their parents were amazing too, in their kind of ineptitude and their sort of self-absorption. And so various things went wrong for this family, but at one point, both parents were in jail. And the grandparents were hard to find. And the middle child, their daughter, we ended up, I guess you'd say, fostering. We brought her over to Salida. She went to Moffett High School. It's like 12 kids per class or something. They hardly had any teams or anything like that because they just didn't have enough kids. So we brought her over here for her junior year of high school, and she got to resume her soccer career. She lived with us, and we just had a great time. Both my kids were gone at that point, and so this girl got some real focused attention from adults that, you know, sit around the table at night and talk and that kind of thing. Really impactful. She's getting married this summer, and my wife said, "We're buying your wedding dress." And I was like, "Yeah, that's a good idea." I had no idea what she meant by that. She and my daughter and this girl, Story, who's getting married, and two of her friends are in Chicago at some kind of world-class wedding dress makers facility. I'm sticking with Coors Light, both for my sanity and for my pocketbook. And yeah, I'll probably be working a few more years longer than I thought. But anyway, that's why you didn't get to meet her. And we'll try it again sometimes. I'll just close by saying, you know, this time of year is really powerful. I think everybody just feels it, right? The lighting is different. Even if you're not directly in agriculture, I think it's in the human DNA to sort of feel this harvest feeling and sort of take a break and maybe enjoy the poignancy of the moment because you know what's coming. You know, as they say on Game of Thrones, winter is coming. And, but I find kind of like Director Sakata said, maybe it's also a point in my lifetime as well as the season. Maybe I'm in that season of life, but I just have this feeling of wanting to just sort of freeze time and hang on to this moment. And in the context of CWCB, I feel that way about all of you. We come and go. This is a term limited thing like other aspects of my weird life. And, but this is a really special time, I feel like, for this board. The folks who've been on this board a while have all remarked about what a great dynamic we have now, what a great team we have. We have a great staff. It's amazing that we have this new director and really, in a way, didn't lose our old director. She's still on the team too. And anyway, I just feel like this is a special moment in time, and I wanted to make note of that and share that with all of you. I'm guessing many of you feel the same way. So that's what I got. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ditto.
I would like to applaud you for your public vulnerability. It's unusual in a context of a public meeting. We're being videoed, we're being live streamed. And I really want to applaud that in you as a person and thank everybody who is a part of this. As you know, I served on the Transportation Commission for 4 years, and the openness and the acceptance of each other and the collaboration is phenomenal. Very unique.
Thank you. Director Brown.
I just love the way you described a wedding dress facility. I myself never did that process, but I have a whole new picture in my head of what that might look like. So thank you for that humor. And thank you, for fostering a young woman, and so excited to hear that she's moving on in her life, and what a blessing for you and your wife. I know that Greg has a wife because I stopped by his house and she was there. So he talks about her all the time, and I can assure you that she is alive and well, and that he doesn't make it up. But I just wanted to thank you. All the things you just said about our board, I would echo. And your leadership now as chair, and now with Director Sakata as vice chair, that's a big reason why things have come, together too. You have done an amazing job with this role, much more than I ever expected of any chair. You've really just gone above and beyond. And between the two of you, I think you'll probably hit every single water-related meeting in the state, which is awesome. So thank you for your dedication there, and thanks for your role as chair. It's been great.
Thank you very much. Go to City and County of Denver and Director Brody.
Thank you, Director Feld. Apparently you've never watched Say Yes to the Dress. I commend it to you if you want to understand this world of wedding dress shopping.
Excellent.
I just want to take a minute to thank the Upper Ark Water Conservancy District, and to thank Director Feld for hosting us in your community. It's clear why you all love this place, and it's been a privilege to get to spend a few days with you in your community. There's a difference when you're traveling to a place as a tourist versus when you're traveling to a place to meet and convene with its local residents. And it's really just been a joy to be here the last few days. So thank you. All right. So I know you've heard me talk about Denver Water's lead reduction in the past, and I just wanted to note that we have now passed 20,000 service lines replaced since beginning this project in 2020. So that's a huge milestone that we're really proud of. Also just wanted to note how we're leveraging the 76 million in federal funding that we've been able to secure through the Water and Power Development Authority. So Denver Water is still continuing to fund the program with our own ratepayer dollars at the same level. And we're essentially layering on that federal funding on top of that financial commitment. And we're deploying it primarily in disadvantaged communities. As you might imagine, the Denver Water service area is a very diverse community. We've got pockets of tremendous wealth, but we also have pockets of poverty and historic disadvantage. And so we're focusing those federal dollars on underserved communities, on multifamily and other service lines that are more difficult to get out due to their location, due to their size. And so it's really just been a tremendous opportunity to redouble our efforts and to really focus on where those lead line replacements can have the biggest impact. So we're grateful to the state and to the federal government for making those resources available so that we can use them to improve public health in the Denver Water Service area. you. Also just wanted to take a minute to talk about our One Water efforts, and in this case, our on-site wastewater treatment system. So when Denver Water decided to redevelop its main operations complex and administration building several years ago, we really wanted to utilize it as an opportunity to demonstrate leadership on One Water. And so as part of the campus project, we planned and installed an on-site wastewater treatment system that takes water from our administration building, treats it on the campus, and then utilizes it for toilet flushing and on-site irrigation as well. And then we also have a rainwater capture system on our complex. Some of you might have seen it when you toured our building several months ago. And in order to be able to utilize these strategies on our campus, I will say it was a big lift. We had to go to the legislature, change the law, go to CDPHE, change regulations, go to water court, get a water right for that rainwater capture. So this is not for the faint of heart, but I am really proud and pleased to share that just recently, I think in the last couple of weeks, we finally got our final approval from CDPHE for full utilization of our water recycling system. And you can see some images of it here on the slide. You can see portions of it being installed. You can see the wetlands both in our building and outside that are actually part of the treatment system for what we call Rufus, reuse for us. We had a little bit of an employee contest to name it. But giving it a clever name, I think, makes it more endearing. We've had a lot of potty humor at Denver Water since learning of this approval. But it is really exciting. And I'm really proud of Denver Water staff who made it happen, including some members of my team, in particular, Dan Arnold in the Office of General Counsel. And folks in our water quality team and in our water resource strategy team. So again, I can't say that I would encourage everyone to do this because it is a huge undertaking, but I'm proud that we could provide the leadership and at least pave the way for others who are interested in doing on-site treatment. Shout out to Russ Sands and our water plan team and our turf team. I thought I would just show a couple of examples of how the turf replacement funding has been utilized and how it really is, well, it's not going to solve our water problems. I do think it can be part of the solution. Denver Water did apply and was awarded funding. And this is one of the projects that we did. We chose this particular site because it is high profile, and a lot of our strategy is around changing hearts and minds, changing ideas of what beautiful landscapes can look like in Colorado and should look like in Colorado. So the picture on the left is the before picture. You can see, we're irrigating turf grass. It's obviously not in the greatest condition. It's right along a very busy street. And then the after is actually a volunteer event where we had, Denver Water employees and others who signed up to help plant the plants that we were able to purchase with the use of that grant funding. And again, we're excited to put it in a visible place where anyone driving by can see the transformation, and we'll get to see these plants grow and mature over time. And then one more from a partner community. This is the Arapahoe County Administration Building turf replacement project. I believe there are about 3 acres of turf grass that were replaced. The picture on the left is, I think, one of the entrances to the building, and it shows again, I think, a beautiful example of what a healthy native landscape can look like. I mean, obviously that one is very well curated and cared for, but it, I think, is a good aspiration of what can be achieved. And then the other pictures are, again, really more the grasses. I think one of the things that we're trying to learn ourselves and also demonstrate is that there's a wide range of landscapes that are appropriate in that, you know, you can do things that are relatively affordable and low cost. You can obviously do things that are much more manicured and you know, require more care. But there is a broad range. It doesn't always have to be prohibitively expensive to undertake these replacement projects. This is in Denver Water service area. Denver Water has been delivering water here, I think, since the 1960s. And Arapahoe County staff estimates that changing out the turf grass to a blend of native grasses will save 1.5 million gallons of water per season. So again, it's not by itself going to solve our water challenges, but I do think it's an important piece of the puzzle, both because of the water savings and because of the power to really change how we think about appropriate and water-wise landscapes in Colorado. So again, just a couple of examples of that turf funding in action, and I'm looking forward to sharing more as Denver Water continues to, you know, set its strategy around turf replacement. Just one other thing I wanted to mention, and this also ties back to the lead program. One of the things that we are experimenting with, you know, with Denver Water dollars is, you know, as we're doing those lead line replacements in targeted blocks in underserved communities, we are offering people the choice of replacing the grass that we tear out with Colorado-scape plant mixes as an alternative. And we're starting small. Those are expensive to do. But we want to see, you know, does it take hold? Is it something that the community wants? Can it be maintained and sustained so that we can determine whether we make that more fully part of the lead program going forward? But just, I think some nice examples of how that money is being deployed and put to use across the state. With that, it's 10 o'clock and I will end my report.
Ian, third day's the charm. We are exactly on schedule. I can't believe it. Any questions for Director Brody? So we're right on schedule for our morning break. So we'll break for 15 minutes and plan to start up again at 10:15. Okay.
Recording stopped.
We're just wrangling a few people. Yeah.
Be sure to get the bell. Right next. Right next. Yeah. Now that she's not there.
We good?
Yeah.
Are you good, Jen? Okay. Okay, well, we're gonna get started here. And resume our meeting. We're up to item 11, which is the Attorney General's report, legal briefing, and executive session with Counselor Mealy and Counselor Steinbrecher. I had heard from Attorney General Weiser that he was trying hard to join us. We'll see if he turns up. So Jen?
Over to Scott Steinbrecher for the Attorney General's report.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you, Chair Felt. I think the AG is still trying to join us, and thank you all for letting me join you virtually this morning. Like Director Boucher, I needed to be home this week so that my wife could travel for work. So we are fathers in arms, and I support you as you try to balance careers and a family. It is no easy task. And Director Cloud, I just wanted to say that I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of your aunt and let you know that I will be thinking about you and your family over the upcoming days. And last, I guess, related to scheduling, Director Riss, I think you mentioned yesterday that how hard you will try to keep the schedule to what's proposed there. And I'll just tell you what I think AG Weiser has already told you, that he really wants to participate in these meetings, and anything you can do to keep that schedule to what it's shown will help him manage his calendar and be a part of those. So I will give just two really brief updates on things that are included in the AG's report. First, I'll mention the Waters of the United States SACIT decision and the EPA's new rule. As you can see in our report, the EPA revised the definition of waters of the US to conform to this SACIT decision. That happened on September 8th, which I think is the day that we sent you all the Attorney General's report. So didn't have time to get it on the agenda, but we would like to provide the board an update on what that revised rule means. And so we will be working on that and might bring that to the board at the November meeting. The other thing that I'll update you on is the Texas versus New Mexico and Colorado litigation on the Rio Grande. As you all know, the special master has issued his report recommending that the US Supreme Court approve the settlement of the three states, the consent decree. The United States has indicated that it may file exceptions to that report, which would go to the United States Supreme Court. And has gotten an extension to do that. Their exceptions are now due at the beginning of October, and our replies would be due in December. We are still hopeful that the United States will decide not to file exceptions and not stand in the way of the three-state settlement, although I will not say that we are holding our breath, and will be fully prepared to brief the exceptions this fall, and have learned in the course of setting those deadlines that if exceptions are filed, the court hopes to have argument in DC in March of 2024. So we are waiting to see how that develops. Like I said, still hopeful that the United States will not stand in the way of the settlement, but are prepared to move forward if they do file exceptions. That's all that I have for you all. Unless you have questions for me.
Are there any questions for Counselor Steinbrecher? Like you gave a very complete report, Scott.
Thank
No
you,
questions.
and I will turn it over to Jen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We are about to vote to go into executive session. During executive session, we will consider agenda item 12A. We are authorized to hold this executive session under 24-6-4023A in the Colorado Revised Statutes, and we're now ready for a motion.
Is there a motion to go into executive session? Director Brody and Director Brown. Before we vote, I just do want to reiterate the direction that I think the board articulated. I heard back in, I think, and in July that we do as part of a increased effort to be as transparent as we can be and accountable and well, those two things, I guess, that we do be mindful of sort of what constitutes attorney-client privilege and what doesn't, and that we just continue to try to navigate that and do better at it to limit the amount of speculation that goes on in the absence of our open or non-privileged conversations. And we try not to venture too far afield from the topic that was put before us, which is Colorado River Post 2026 negotiations. So with that, is there all in favor of going into executive session? Please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, so we'll go into executive session. Do you need a minute? Yep. Okay, so we'll. Yeah.
They're in the gallery.
Yeah.
Recording stopped.
recognizing there are a lot of other things going on, but we also want to be responsive to any questions or needs that you all might have. And, you know, the reason that we started doing those in the first place is that we were hearing that you really wanted to be completely in the loop on all Colorado River issues and wanted to be responsive to that request. So we will start shortening this item, but we also want to make sure that you know that we're always available if you want to request a more extensive update. But we did receive a couple of specific questions, of course, from Director Sakata, who always thoroughly reads all of our materials. And so I have asked Michelle to address those two questions today. And then I'll give a couple of other brief updates. But I think your questions were specifically focused on the bathymetry study at Lake Powell and also the consumptive use and losses report. Those are the two things that I've asked Michelle to really focus in on, but I know that she has a full slide deck of hidden slides on hydrology issues. So if you have any questions, she can easily pop around to those. So Michelle, with that, I think I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. And I think that we'll be screen sharing. That's great.
Thanks. I really enjoy these. So, you know, whatever decisions are made. I also had another point of discussion potentially. I listened to the Colorado River District's meeting in July, their quarterly meeting, and they presented, John Karen presented on this ongoing study they've been doing. And I guess my question, I know they have been contacting the roundtables from, I don't know if it's all of them or just from the West Slope. And there is plans to share this information with the roundtables. And I'm wondering if this board shouldn't hear that presentation and understand the nuances of why, you know, they present their information the way they do versus the way we present our information, and where there's a chance for us to learn from each other, or at least understand where the discrepancies are as we go about our business. But it's hard for me as the CWCB representative to not, you know, I'm inherently not going to understand those differences because I'm not a technical expert, but then I get a lot of questions from my roundtable where they're using a reference of knowledge that I don't quite comprehend. And I have a feeling that that makes me look inept, which is not the first time and won't be the last. But I'm just, you know, trying to figure out how to reconcile the information we're all receiving so that there's a, you know, at least we understand where it all comes from. Why?
Director Brown, so let me take your questions and comments in part. The first thing is, you know, I want to certainly with these updates be responsive to what you want. So if, you know, if you all do want to discuss continuing to have these, that's perfectly fine. We can also do individual briefings anytime you might want them. On the second question, the Colorado River District's risk study, I guess it's a prerogative of this board if you'd like to have River District staff come and discuss that. I think it does implicate a number of, from my perspective, potentially legal and technical questions that I think we could certainly have staff available to address. I'll just offer up our newly appointed Colorado River Senior Technical Specialist here, along with Michelle Garrison, who I think could speak to some of your outstanding questions. And if there are additional legal questions that might come up, we can direct those to legal counsel. So if I think it's really up to this board how you'd like to move forward with that.
Can I have just a follow-up?
Yeah.
Did the River District reach out to you? I had asked them to coordinate potentially when they could present that information if they were available. No.
Not to me.
Okay.
But I'm not seeing anyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's definitely up to the board. I mean, I did get a chance to listen to it. I didn't see the slides, but just a suggestion.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, we're currently in this era of alternative facts, and which I don't think any of us enjoy. And I think it would be at a minimum, good for us to understand what it is that differs in their approach. Otherwise, I don't know how we can, in a truly intellectually honest way, assert that we're right. Strong arguments from a legitimate part of this discussion, entity in this discussion that are different, which I think is what you're getting at. We need to understand that. May not because it's necessarily our role to sort all that out, but we are often put in the position of having to. Too, of whatever you called it. So I think that it seems like it would serve your purposes too, honestly, Amy, to make sure you have analyzed whatever that risk study is.
And I want to be clear that we have looked at it, that we all are aware of it and do have some thoughts that we'd be happy to share. So
okay.
If you'd like, I can coordinate with River District staff and our staff and figure that out.
Yeah. Anybody have a problem with that? Let's do it.
Okay, we'll do it. All right, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Michelle then to continue the presentation.
Thanks, Amy. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. All right, so we'll go quick. And now it's not advancing the slides. All right, so we'll skip, other than to say, I'll go really quick through this. The spring was really, really wet and cold and snowy. So we got good runoff, but really precipitation for the year in Colorado is mixed, some above average, some below average. So snowpack was fantastic. Runoff was better than average, but not that impressive overall. In terms of climate forecasts, you can see short term, Colorado is supposed to be dry. In the middle, maybe a little bit of a wet trend in October as part of the El Nino pattern. And then in the seasonal, you'll see that El Nino pattern of wet, further to our south. So not a lot of strong signal there for what to expect. You've seen the Powell runoff forecast. It came in the runoff period, 166% of average, but not so much over the entire water year. It's more like 140% of average. So a great year, but not as big as the runoff when we had that big wet spring and cold, and we got really good runoff off of that. In terms of storage conditions, you can see this, and you can see again that those higher percentages of average for spring runoff than water year flows. And you can see that reservoirs have improved in storage. Not all of them are full. Lake Powell certainly still only 38% of full, and releasing more than normal because this was a balancing year. In terms of the operational forecast at Lake Powell, this is the September 1st forecast. On the right for the water year, on the left for water year 2024, ignore that. Really, you're just looking at 2023 looking to be, above average. Not the best year we've seen, but certainly a drastic improvement from the 3 years before it, which is why we're seeing some improvement. And on the right, just a tally of those Lake Powell releases. And the only thing I want to point out is to remind people that in water year 2022, when Powell got so low, Reclamation decided that in addition to DROA releases, it was going to withhold 480,000 acre feet in Powell that it otherwise would have released. And that water has been released instead in year 2023 as part of the balancing releases. Those balancing releases can go up to 9.5 million acre feet, but as the summer has dried out and there have been changes, conservation and high inflows into Mead and below Mead that go into that balancing equation. Now the total balancing release for the year is forecasted to be closer to 8.65 million acre feet. So almost a 1 million acre foot difference from the spring estimate. In terms of drought response operations, both Blue Mesa and Flaming Gorge are now trying to recover the water that they released in 2021 and 2022, now that we've had a better year in 2023. So this slide is for the Aspinall unit. On the left, you'll see the orange versus blue shows smaller releases in orange versus what they would have to release in blue to get down to the icing target in December. And that is how they are making up that difference. If they hit the icing target in December, whether or not that the volumetric accounting shows the exact same volume having been saved, when they hit the December 31st icing target at Aspinall, if any more water were to come in, they would release it anyway, which is the other trigger for declaring Blue Mesa recovered. And so no matter what the actual volumes released are, Blue Mesa will hit that target and will be considered recovered. Flaming Gorge is the same thing. The point at which your volume and or the point at which you've hit an elevation at which you would release any extra water coming in anyway, and therefore you declare the reservoir recovered, that occurs in May at Flaming Gorge. And so you'll see a longer time period on these graphs for Flaming Gorge that indicate that it may take them, they're currently estimating until February to make up the difference. And again, this is volumetric by month, and here's the actual changes that they're making by day in releases to try to make up that volume. But if something changes in their inflows and their operations, it is that May 1st target that they're looking out to ensure that Flaming Gorge recovers all of the water that it released. One issue that we're continuing to work on is that DROA was very successful in propping up Lake Powell elevations at a really critical period. But we need to be very, very careful that when all of the DROA operations and recovery are finished, Lake Powell should end up in the same place overall, and the upper basin reservoirs should end up in the same place overall, as if they had not done DROA. That's how you know that everything has recovered. And the way that it was done in this particular instance, Lake Powell will actually end up a little bit worse off because of the balancing year. And so that's something that going forward needs to be improved in terms of upper basin working with reclamation on how you look at futility and the success of DROA operations. So stay tuned for that, but that is one thing that we're working to improve. In terms of the lower basin, a reminder that starting in 2022, the lower basin was operating in tier 1 shortage plus required reductions based on the drought contingency plans, Minute 323, and the binational water scarcity. Those are outlined, the 2022 ones are outlined in this line. In 2023, they dropped to tier 2. And now for 2024, they're going to be back up in the same tier 1. And a reminder, these volumes on the right-hand side are the totals for the lower basin states plus Mexico. And that is a combination of credits and wet water and other things. So if you see a volume on this right-hand side, that doesn't all relate to wet water in Meade. Here's the spaghetti plots, just a reminder of when they look out into the future, what a widely scattered future we could be looking at that they need to plan for. Quite often, the only thing they report is the one in green, but you can see really you could be getting anything. The Lake Powell one is much more varied than the Lake Meade one, who Lake Meade gets a lot of buffer from individual hydrology years because of Lake Powell operations. So to focus on what we were asked to report on, and this is just a little bit of the bathymetric information, but be happy to sit down with anybody who wants the rest of the information and share it. Reclamation recently, from 2017 to 2019, updated its information about the sedimentation of the upper basin reservoirs and what that does to their total storage, their active storage, their dead pools. You know, some of that sediment may be replacing dead pool water. Some of that sediment's up in the active storage. And so there's a lot of information in those reports that is not reflected in this table, but just a few things as an example. Lake Powell overall, total storage capacity lost approximately 4% of its capacity between 1986, when the last bathymetric update was run, and the 2017-2018 update. For Blue Mesa, you see the loss was less than 1%. For Navajo, 3.3%, and Flaming Gorge, 2.2%. Those bathymetric surveys are very detailed, and so Reclamation does have all the information about how much storage at every foot of elevation has changed. And those are really important in understanding, for instance, when you get into the lower levels of Lake Powell, as Lake Powell's getting low, there is some loss of storage there, which means that it's important to update the models, because Lake Powell will drop faster as it's getting empty, or rise faster and as soon as more wet hydrology comes in, if some of that is sediment instead of water. And so it really does change how quickly Lake Powell or Navajo or Blue Mesa drop or increase in elevation when you hit dry or wet years. And so Reclamation is working on getting those things updated into its models so that that information is correct. And it does make a little bit of a difference when you're trying to understand how the reservoirs respond to wet and dry hydrology. The other thing we were asked to talk a little bit about, and again, happy to sit down with anybody who wants more information than this, but it's the consumptive uses and losses reports that are put out by Reclamation. Reclamation, based on a directive from the Colorado River Basin Project Act of 1968, is supposed to make reports of the annual consumptive uses and losses of water from the Colorado River system. So that's upper basin and lower basin, including tributaries, after each successive 5-year period, starting in 1970. And you'll see here, those reports are supposed to be prepared in consultation with the lower basin states and with the Upper Colorado River Commission acting for the upper basin states, and are supposed to be transmitted to the president, Congress, and the governors of the signatory states to the compact. Through 2005, Reclamation has put out the reports for the upper basin and the lower basin. Since 2005, Reclamation has only published the consumptive uses and losses report for the upper basin. So what you see in the middle is the front page of the Upper Colorado River Basin consumptive uses and losses report for 2016 to 2020. And they've also put out some provisional information for 21 through 23, but it won't be until 26 or 27 that they actually put out the 21 through 25 report. When Reclamation does this, they are trying to use basin scale methodologies, looking at irrigated acreage, stream flow, shortages, population estimates, to try to get these estimates by state for the whole basin. And so they're very broad, and they try to use one method across, for example, the entire upper basin. Those methods may be a little different than each state might use for individual locations. So Colorado might have a method that it thinks is very, very accurate for some valley at 8,000 feet and it's hay meadows. And Reclamation's is going to be not that detailed. They're going to find something they think works for the entire basin, but the number they get at that elevation might be a little different. Reclamation had before been using crop coefficient methods, similar to, but not identical to, the ones Colorado was using itself, because of kind of the elevation differences and because of Colorado's extra knowledge in its own state about where shortages occur and when. So our estimates were a little different, but generally in line. Reclamation has been working on moving to a remote sensing method for the entire upper basin. And again, not so much focused on getting the numbers right at every single location, but being able to use one remote sensing method for the entire upper basin that's consistent and gives them consistent numbers from year to year. When they do that, when they do something like that, it really changes not just their computations going forward, but what they would have estimated going backwards. So they will also do some revisions to some previous years to say what they think they would have gotten with this new method in some old years. And if it changes their estimates of things like natural flow at Lee Ferry for the basin, they will also go back and recompute all of that information and update it. And so in the upper basin, that has been occurring regularly. On the right-hand side, you can kind of see a table of the types of information that you get about upper basin uses by state plus evaporation. That data has been regularly available. However, the last time we've seen information about the consumptive uses and losses, including tributary uses in the lower basin, was the 2001 through 2005 report that was published in 2011 and revised in 2012. And so the type of information that you would get from that report for all the states, this is just one summary table, is shown on the right. And you will see that for the upper basin states, things look very much the same. Everything in the upper basin drains into the basin, so there's not tributary versus main stem. It all drains to the main stem from the upper basin, but in the lower basin, you'll see these divisions of mainstream use and tributary use tracked by tributary. You'll also see deliveries to Mexico and things like that. This is the report that hasn't been updated by Reclamation since the 2005 report was published. So for the last 18 years, we haven't seen any more consumptive uses and losses reports for the lower basin. We have seen accounting of the contract deliveries to lower basin contract users, but we have not seen this consumptive uses and losses report that is directed by statute.
Michelle,
Yes.
we have a question from Director Brown.
Yes.
Hi. Sorry, I don't read reports like this, thankfully for everyone involved, but can you explain how it says consumptive uses and losses, but there's only one number? So how are they doing this? I know this is stupid question day. I'm just owning it. So like, for example, under Arizona, it says upper basin 2001 39, and then 2600 something mainstream. Can you just tell me what those numbers actually are? Are they uses minus losses, losses minus uses?
They are uses plus losses in some cases. And it depends on what it is. And I picked the summary table, which is not, this is just the summary table. So there are other tables where they actually, for example, where Arizona says lower basin tributaries, there's a list of tributaries and they use irrigated acreage, and some method used to be a crop coefficient method. Most likely now, I think they have the data for remote sensing in the lower basin, and they would be doing those lower basin tributaries via remote sensing. But if you dig through the other pages in the report, all of those things are included. So for
maybe
instance,
just
you'll see other. Yes. Go ahead.
So that we don't have to painfully do this. Just help me understand where it says under Arizona upper basin 39, that's 39,000, right?
Yes.
And what is the difference between that and the two numbers below it? Lower basin mainstream, lower basin tributaries, because
yes. So Arizona gets 50,000 acre feet of upper basin use for tributaries above Lake Powell in the compact. And so Reclamation tracks that use separately based on population estimates and irrigated acreage, anything it knows about water deliveries. So that is Arizona's upper basin use out of its 50. And
Uses
then the low,
like the losses that are accounted for in the upper basin. The losses
no,
attached.
because the losses are mostly reservoir evap, and those don't accrue. Some of those do not accrue to Arizona. They accrue to the upper division states. So for instance, the evaporation off of Navajo or Flaming Gorge doesn't accrue to Arizona. So
I've got it. I don't think I need
50,
to.
they get their 50 off the top as a set number, as opposed to the percentages and if that makes sense. And then the mainstream is mostly calculated on deliveries, and the lower basin tributaries is calculated based on irrigated acreage and delivery information they have on those tributaries. And so those are the 3 different numbers that you see for Arizona. So based on the compact, right, the lower basin gets 7.5 million acre feet total from the mainstream, and then another million acre feet from the tributaries. So those are tracked separately for each lower basin state. If they're taking off the tributaries, you'll see not that for California, but you will see it for Arizona and Nevada, because they do take water off of some tributaries to the Colorado main stem.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that.
Sure. If you have any other questions, I can pull more useful information out of the report and not just one of the summary tables, but I just wanted to give an example of the types of information that were in those reports that are now overdue. And that's all I have. I will pass it over to Amy if there are no other questions.
Okay. Any other questions for Michelle? Oh, Paul, sorry. Director Burchett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Michelle, first of all, you're awesome. I love your humor. I'm just sitting here scratching my head though, like how is that possible that they haven't done reporting on lower basin?
That is an excellent question for which I do not have a good answer. I believe Reclamation has been collecting that data and for whatever reason, not publishing it.
Ah, excellent. Thank you.
Any other easily answered questions?
No, but Robert, sorry, can I talk? Chairman?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't even know how to say this word. Bathymetry?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. The River Radius podcast did an excellent episode on the returning rapids in Cataract Canyon.
Yeah.
That would be supplemental to what I assume was your question.
Thank you, Director Brown. And thanks for that update. That helps me understand why you put those comments in the letter. It makes a lot of sense why we need that information. So thank you.
So on the last agenda item, I just had a couple really quick things to note. One of which was we're still waiting on a supplemental EIS on the process to revise the 07 guidelines, or to do a supplemental EIS on the 07 guidelines. You'll notice that all the materials that you have are the same that you got from me 2 months ago, because we haven't really gotten any new information. So still waiting on that. And I also had a really cool slide up showing Becky as Waldo and all the places she's been across the state, which I'm going to email to all of you because you really need to see it. Because since Becky has been full-time commissioner, we've really made it a priority to get out and about across the state. We've been a lot of places. We've had a lot of road miles, and we still have a lot to go. So I just wanted you all to know that we're working hard to get out and talk to a lot of people, and that's really a priority for us. So with that, maybe I'll just go ahead and close out that agenda item and move on to the next one, unless there are any questions. I see that's where we
Mr.
are.
Chair.
Yes, Director
Thank you,
Sakata.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, thanks for the road trip, guys. You guys have done Great job. And Emily Zamack reminded me to show everybody that on the home screen of my phone, we have the QR code for the Commissioner's Corner. She advises that we all do that. So whenever we talk to anybody, we can just say, hey, scan this QR code and there you go. You'll take you to the Commissioner Corner. Thank you. Thanks for all the work you guys are doing.
Thank
Okay.
you so much.
So now are we going to Colorado River System Conservation Pilot Program update?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so I think I can control the slides now. Again, for the record, Amy Ostick, and I'm going to be talking about the System Conservation Pilot Program and some next steps there. But first, I'm going to review where we've been just very, very quickly. So 2023, we implemented the SEPP. Again, we got reauthorization from Congress to do that back in December. We ended up implementing 64 projects across the Upper Basin, totaling roughly 38,000 acre feet of conserved consumptive use. And 22 of those projects were in Colorado. And as I've been saying lately, we have the privilege of having the most amount of projects and the least amount of conserved consumptive use in our state. So we saved about 2,500 acre feet of water. That's just estimated through those 22 projects. And the map that you see here to the right is actually, it really should be on the next slide because it shows, after implementing all this as it's being implemented, UCRC staff, Commissioner Mitchell and everyone really got out and started talking to people about how things were going and what they thought about the process. If we're going to do it again, how would we want to do things differently? So these stars actually show the places that UCRC staff visited. They were pretty busy. And I just want to provide a quick summary of what those lessons learned were, the kind of high points of what UCRC staff gathered and what we heard from water users in Colorado. The first, I think, was the most universal feedback we heard, that this has to start much earlier if we were to do it again. Getting things kicked off in December was just not really tenable for water users trying to make decisions about their operations. And it put, frankly, all of us in a crunch to do things very quickly and maybe not as well as they could have been done had we had more time. So that's a big one. Another one is there was a lot of confusion, frustration, choose your adjective, about the pricing mechanism. So if, the program were to move forward again, I think one thing that we'd want to look at is how do we provide a firm fixed price at the outset, or how do we, look at providing more information, more transparency on pricing? And that would need to be a coordinated effort with reclamation since they're the ones providing the money. So that's another thing that we heard from a lot of people. The other thing is, there was some confusion about how conserved consumptive use is estimated. We had a lot of people who actually hired their own engineers to do an estimate, but UCRC had its own consultant who was doing this work. And that's the number that we used. And so having clear communication, working together about how to come up with that number and making sure people are aware of how we're doing it, how the UCRC is doing it would be key as well. And these next two are kind of related, but just consistent and clear messaging. I think that there was a lot of misinformation that got out about the program, and just making sure that UCRC is really on top of that we're controlling the messaging. And also greater transparency on approach, purpose, review. Again, just having the time to be able to do that would make that a lot easier. Because when you're starting a program in December, you're putting out an RFP at the same time that you're providing people with all this information, and it's very quick turnaround. So I think that the timing component of this would help resolve a lot of these other issues as well. And of course, the reason that we're talking about this, the reason that we're thinking about lessons learned and what we might be able to do better is because we have the option, the UCRC has the option to run this program again this coming year. The federal reauthorization only goes through fall of 2024. So this would be, under the current authorization we have, the last time we'd be able to do it now. This afternoon, the UCRC is going to be discussing this, whether to move forward with another year of SCPP. And based on the input that UCRC staff received, based on the input that that Becky and I have heard across the state, the UCRC staff identified 3 potential options. And I do want to be clear that this is based on input from everyone across the Upper Basin, water users and the other states as well. But the options that have been identified as one, just, don't do it. No SCPP next year or this year. Number two, implement a program with process improvements that would include things like the timing issue, the messaging issues, all the things you saw on the previous slide. And the third option is to do all of that, process improvements, but also narrow the scope of what we're looking at with SCPP. So, another piece of feedback that we heard a lot was we don't want to create water that is system water that simply gets sent down to the lower basin to be used. And there are two things that I would note there. The first is that, as Michelle, I believe, pointed out, next year, the water release from Powell is set. We're not going to be in a balancing year. So that might shift that perspective a little bit, in that, there's maybe less likelihood that SCPP water will get sent down. But the other thing is, we heard from a lot of water users that, look, it's not great. It's not, it's not perfect, but we really appreciated having the ability, the flexibility to try different things, to do things that worked for our operation that we might not have been able to do had we not had that money and the ability to do that. So to get back to this third option, it's really looking at, could we do it in a way that is focused on those types of projects that are building resilience or helping water users adjust to drought, something more than just the straight up fallowing project, frankly. And I want to be very clear that, there would still be fallowing projects. It's all about conserved consumptive use, but is there a way to really prioritize looking at projects that are good for water users and for the state in another way? And also looking at, are there open questions about demand management that could be investigated through some of these projects? Are there opportunities for that? So, the UCRC already has had one meeting to talk about all this. And what we heard from the three other commissioners, not the one sitting behind me, is that they really were interested in moving forward with this third option. And Commissioner Mitchell was very clear that she really needed to hear from people across the state before committing to anything. So the vote wasn't taken on that date. Since that time, I wish that the Where's Waldo or Where's Becky slide was up, because we've been out and about talking about a lot of things, including SCPP. So she's gotten a lot of input since then. And, I think that there are a lot of water users that we've talked to who would be interested in participating in a slightly different type of program. So again, that vote will be this afternoon. And that brings me to, what does that mean for this board? What is CWCB's role? And as you may recall, this board made the decision to approve SCPP this year, I guess, as a state-approved conservation program, which provides protections listed in statute for the water rights associated with those projects. So the role of this board, similarly, if we were to move forward with this again, would be to have the opportunity to approve the program, not the individual projects, but the program as a conservation program and provide that same protection. So depending on how the UCRC meeting goes this afternoon, that's something that we might be coming back to talk with you about, maybe in November or January, but we can cross that bridge when we get there. So that's where we are. And I'm happy to take any questions.
All right. Thanks, Amy. Director Vasquez.
November will be soon enough for that decision?
I think it will be, because we won't have anyone under contract yet in November. So that I think that the idea would be, if it goes forward, the information, I think we want to start in October. I don't know what that looks like, or, but that's the time frame identified in the feedback we got, that if we're going to do it, we really have to start the outreach and all that in October. But I think we wouldn't actually be moving forward with, getting people signed up until after November. I don't know exactly when it would be. So I think that would give the board an opportunity to, it would be enough time before water users are actually enrolled and participating, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I'm curious about your messaging. So if I were one of those water users, I'd want to know for sure that I wasn't damaging my water right. So in your messaging to them, would you assume that the board would do that?
I think in our messaging, we'd have to be very clear that it will be, we can't be we can't assume what this board will do, right? And, you know, we just have to be very clear with them that we do not yet have that level of protection, that approval. Oh, yay. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy about this. So I think that's something we have to be candid about. But, you know, ideally, that would still give them enough time to make a decision about ultimately whether or not they want to participate.
So the best you could do is point to this year that it was done, and it will be posed to the board in November, right?
Correct. And just as a reminder, this year it was done in March. So it was
Yeah.
pretty late in the process. And that's because we were on this condensed timeframe. So I think doing it earlier would give our water users a little bit more comfort. Excited about this slide. This is my Brent Newman slide.
Okay, Director Boucher.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I, mentioned this earlier, and well, first of all, Amy, you're awesome too. And I have to start saying that to all staff. As we've done this, conserve consumptive use roadshow, the more that it just kind of echoes in my head, I realize that, SCPP has some interesting political conversations. And I think point number one is that whatever Commissioner Mitchell and team, best need tools for negotiation, I think that should be a priority. But additionally, that project that we had in Grand County based on 2020 data, it's like One Meadows in the high 30% range, One Meadows in the high 50% range of water savings, and then One Meadows in I think it was 76% of water savings. And it seems that as Dr. Cabot is presenting it, it kind of goes back to like this average in the upper 50s that, feels kind of good. And while that data matches remote sensing well, which I think is a good thing, great thing, I think the more that we can look at projects, if we're really interested in longer term projects of conservation, it would be really fascinating to take the data and the information that we have, pair them with other projects in similar locations or similar sorts of riparian corridors or benches or otherwise, to really reflect back on that. And knowing that every year weather and other conditions are going to matter and change, and see how these things come close to averaging out or not, that everything remains to be very different. Because in my general opinion, having been around this, we're going to need a lot more information, to zero in on what really I think people could be comfortable with talking about averages. And so I think it's a good thing, and would support the third for whatever that's worth, based on not my feelings, but really just my real life experiences having worked with that project. So thank you.
Director Brody, did you have a comment?
So, yeah, just a quick comment to remind us and those listening and potential applicants that this board's role as a board is quite limited in this process. It's really just, determining whether the statutory factors for this being approved as a conservation program are met. I'm sure, there are individuals around this table and listening who feel very strongly that this is a good opportunity for innovation and to try out new ideas and new ways to think about how we conserve water. And I'm sure there are others who feel very strongly that this is a terrible idea and that we shouldn't, as a state or as individual water users, participate in any way in sending water downstream. And while that is a very healthy debate, it's not one for this board.
Amy, I appreciate that. Being from the Rio Grande and maybe not quite clued in, I got the impression in March that the SCPP might be a little contentious. I don't know if I was right or not, but that's what I felt. Point being, is there any way to approve it as a conservation plan that it could be less than just yearly approval, just to take one point of contention out of like what Director Brody says, what the limitations of this board are? Or is it by statute have to be approved by this board as a conservation program every individual year that it might be implemented?
I want to make sure I understand your question, that the actual approval of the projects that move forward does have to be done by the UCRC because of the funding agreement that they have with the federal government. And, you know, that, I think that means that the role of this board, as Director Brody pointed out, is limited in terms of just providing those statutory protections. However, it was kind of hard to implement this year. And Commissioner Mitchell is certainly taking into account, you know, what could we do within Colorado to make it better this year? And so I don't want to get ahead of Commissioner Mitchell, and I don't want to, you know, say anything that, you know, but I do want to say that she's fully committed to increasing the transparency and looking at how we can do that side of it a little bit better. So maybe providing a little bit more information on the front end so that those who were displeased with how it went last year, those, you know, really anyone interested across the state will just have more information to look at when, you know, we get the proposals. So that's something that I think she's really thinking about if it does move forward, implementing something like that.
I guess what I'm asking is, I recognize that we don't approve the projects and that's outside of our scope, but we do approve whether it's a recognized conservation program. That's kind of the limit of what we do. And my question is, does that have to be done yearly? Or is there ever a time when you say that is a recognized conservation program in Colorado from here forward?
Understood.
That's what I'm
I
asking,
totally
is it-
missed your question. I'm so sorry.
I speak very clearly. I get that. Sorry.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Essentially, could the board make the decision that any system conservation pilot program in the future is considered a state approved conservation program? And I think that's a possibility. Okay, it's not a possibility. I apologize. It turns out I'm not actually a real lawyer anymore. How about I just say we'll get back to you on the extent of the flexibility there. I think that, you know, and I'm just trying to put my Lane hat on for a second. The fact that it does only have federal reauthorization through fall of 2024 at this time maybe could create some confusion or some boundaries on that. So we'll look into that and we'll get back to you. Thanks.
Okay. Director Sakata, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, knowing this was on the agenda, you know, I did reach out to my colleagues to get some input. And I think what you outlined here would really solve a lot of the issues. You know, that clear messaging was really going to be important, I think, because I think there was just so much misunderstanding going into last year and the rush of it. And so I think the road trip that you've been on has been beneficial, allowing people to provide their input. And then, you know, just understanding that it's not demand management. And we learn things. I mean, even though as difficult as it was to put through last year's program, we learned things. And learning is hard sometimes. And so I think I really appreciate the approach that you're taking here and would reinforce that. But my one question is, would the potential looming government shutdown put a monkey wrench in this at all? Sorry, I'm with Director Combs. I just messed things up, right?
Thanks for that easy question, Director Sakata. I think we could work it out. I don't know for certain. I'm going to have to get back to you on that. But yeah, I mean, it does depend on how long they're shut down, but also, you know, if they are anticipating that happening, are there some things that we can put in place to make sure that, you know, we're okay? I'll get back to you.
Are there other questions? Yes, I have a comment, I guess, that, you know, I think without going over the top, I hope, you know, have made some strong comments about SCPP. And I won't reiterate them, but I will say that this notion of, as opposed to a producer just sort of taking a year off, which I recognize isn't what happens, because you look at the size of the projects approved in Colorado and there probably aren't many that a complete operation was shut down or something. But in addition to that acknowledgement, I think the notion that innovation, that this could create a window, right? I mean, there's some innovations or some resilience measures that you might want to implement that you couldn't implement while you're in production because you have to do something to the field or the water system or whatever. Then they're not all conceptual. Some of them are very nuts and bolts. And I do think, in my mind, I do think that projects that involve that kind of use of either the time or the money or both are more clearly, in my mind, potentially really effective conservation projects, because I think innovation and resilience is almost always going to involve finding ways to do more with less rather than doing less with more. And which is what I was interpreting SCPP as, is doing less with more. I mean, getting paid to do less. And so that little sentence in there in your, I don't know what it was, 5 points. It's a powerful one. And it helps me kind of come to grips with here we are again. So, you know, coupled with a better organized plan and earlier timing, it makes it easier for me to walk back some of the things that I said. So just being honest there, as well as understanding there is a political reality behind all this, and this is hardly the thing to hang our future on, right? It's a small piece of a way bigger pie that you all are working on. So I want to acknowledge that too. And then just say it will be easier for everyone to deal with this if the sooner we get started. So you know that already, but just say it. Any other comments on this item? Else you want to say about it? Or?
No, I really appreciate the input and support. Thank you.
Yes, Director Vasquez.
I'm going to steal something Commissioner Felt just said. We're going to get you a little hat with a reverse mirror on it, like a bicycle.
So that I can see Laney and Becky. Oh
Legal
gosh.
rear view.
I don't think I want that.
Okay, I guess we're done with that item. Director Brown, you see you reaching for the.
Yeah, I know you guys have to go do more work, but just Amy, thank you.
I can speak for Director Boucher. Thank you all. All right. Is there anybody in the room wishing to make public comment today? Do we have anybody online that you think? Nope. Going to close public comment. And are there any other items to discuss?
We adjourn.
I knew it. Is there a second? Dr. Vasquez, all those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, Director Boucher and Director Cloud.